Hey champs! I am excited to teach you a little bit more about biographies this week. Last week we learned about what biographies are and what good readers of biographies do. So think back, activate that schema. What did you learn last week about biographies? Or maybe what do you already know about biographies? Okay, I hope some of you are thinking that you know biographies are books about real people. Some of them are still living. Maybe some of them are people from the past. Some biographies are written like a story, but they're all nonfiction. Biographies are true stories or true text that teach us about a person. Because it's a biography, not an autobiography, these books are written about somebody by someone else. If I were to write an autobiography, I would be writing a story about my own life. Or if Amelia Earhart was writing an autobiography, she would be the author. But biographies are written by someone else about an influential or famous person, either from history or current. Many times biographies are written in chronological order or in sequence from the beginning of their life to the end. A lot of times you'll even find a timeline right inside of some of your biography texts. You've learned about the chronological text structure in class. So you're going to notice, like at the beginnings of sections of text, maybe you'll see dates. On January 17th, 1706, Benjamin Franklin was born. So then as you go through the book, you're going to notice that time is passing by and some major events in Benjamin Franklin's life are happening during those times, and they're going to highlight those important events. We learned last week that biographies, they talk about the struggles and obstacles that a person has to overcome in order to reach their goals. So it's so important that you're thinking about what were some of the hardships or roadblocks that someone had to overcome in order to do the great thing that they're known for, in order to be a famous basketball player or musician or inventor or environmentalist. So many times the people worth reading about, the stories worth reading have heart. We've talked about that. In those obstacles that people have to overcome give stories heart. They give people reason to be inspired. They give people cause for reading a book, right? I want to learn about Jim Henson maybe because I know about the Muppets and I think they're awesome and I love to draw just like Jim Henson, so maybe I can relate to this character and I could be inspired by some of the hardships that he had to overcome to become such a well-known, impactful person in history. Okay, so next we need to talk about a little comprehension strategy. We learned last week that readers of biography text key into what's important. They focus on the important details. We know that writers love to include figurative language and sometimes elements of humor, but it's really important as a reader to think about, is this just a detail or is this an important event? Okay, so I'm going to pause this video and we're going to listen to a biography called The Tree Lady, and then we're going to come back and we're going to think about what were the 5 important events that happened in this person's life. Not the extra details, just the 5 important events. And then you are going to head to Epic and try it on your own with anybody that you'd like to learn about. All right, champs, let's listen to the story, The Tree Lady. Hi champs! Today I'm going to read to you a biography about a lady who became known as the Tree Lady. I chose this biography this week because there's a very special holiday coming up this Friday, April 24th. Who thinks they know what it is? Yes, you. It's Arbor Day! And we will be learning a little bit about what it means to celebrate Arbor Day, the history of Arbor Day, and why it's such an important holiday. Okay, let's dive into the story, the Tree Lady. Catherine Olivia Sessions grew up in the woods of Northern California. She gathered leaves from oaks and elms, she collected needles from pines and redwoods, and she braided them together with flowers to make necklaces and bracelets. It was the 1860s, and girls from Kate's side of town weren't supposed to get their hands dirty. But Kate did. Kate listened well in school. She learned how to write and count. She remembered the poems and stories she read, but best of all, she liked studying wind and rain, muscles and bones, plants and trees, especially trees. Most girls were discouraged from studying science, but not Kate. Kate felt the trees were her friends. She loved the way they reached toward the sky and how their branches stretched wide to catch the light. Trees seemed to Kate like giant umbrellas that sheltered her and the animals, birds, and plants that lived in the forest. Not everyone feels at home in the woods, but Kate did. When Kate grew up, she left home to study science at college. She looked at soil and insects through a microscope. She learned how plants made food and how they drank water, and she studied trees from around the world. No woman had ever graduated from the University of California with a degree in science. But in 1881, Kate did. After graduation, Kate took a job in Southern California. When her boat docked in San Diego, she saw that her new home was a desert town. Kate never thought she would live in a place with very few trees, but now she did. Kate began her job as a teacher. She was also the vice principal of the school, so she had to make sure that everyone followed the rules. Kate missed studying science and was not sure she would stay on the job, but for 2 years, she did. From her school, Kate could see City Park in the hills above town. It was called a park, but it didn't look like one. It was where people grazed cattle and dumped garbage. Most San Diegans didn't think trees could ever grow there, but Kate did. With Kate's love for the woods, she thought San Diego needed trees more than anything else, so she left teaching to become a gardener. She knew she must plant trees that could live in dry soil, with lots and lots of sunshine. Her friends worried Kate wouldn't find trees like that, but she did. Kate became a tree hunter. She wrote letters to gardeners all over the world and asked them to send her seeds that could grow in a desert. She also traveled south into Mexico to look for trees that liked hot, dry weather and steep hills and canyons. Not everyone knows how to hunt for trees, but Kate did. Soon Kate's trees were planted along streets, around schools, and in small parks and plazas all over town. People bought trees from Kate's nursery and planted them in their yards, from elms and oaks to eucalyptuses and palms. By the turn of the century, young trees from Kate's nursery were growing in every part of San Diego. Most people didn't think a desert town could sustain so many trees, but Kate did. Then in 1909, the city leaders announced that a great fair called the Panama, California Exposition was coming to San Diego in 1915. The fair would be held in City Park, which was now called Balboa Park. Kate felt Balboa Park still needed more trees, thousands more, to look beautiful and to shade the visitors that came to the fair. That was too many trees for Kate to plant by herself. But she knew lots of people could do it together. She asked her friends to bring their friends and come to the park for tree planting parties. Again and again, people volunteered to help. Those volunteers weren't sure they could plant enough trees, but before long, they did. And when the fair opened, San Diego was ready. Millions of trees and plants filled Balboa Park. The fair had so many visitors it stayed open for 2 years instead of 1. People came from near and far to see the attractions and stroll in the cool shade. The fairgoers couldn't believe San Diego had such magnificent gardens. But thanks to Kate, it did. In the years after the fair, Kate was given many awards for her work, and people took to calling her the mother of Balboa Park. She continued gardening and planting trees until her death in 1940. Back then, few could have imagined that San Diego would become the lush, leafy city it is today. But all along, year after year, Catherine Olivia Sessions did. Wasn't that a good book? Makes me want to go out and plant a tree. All right, so we know that biography readers key into what's important. So we're going to practice doing that right now. So first of all, we need to think about who the biography was about. So I'm going to write here that the biography was about Kate Sessions. Great, that's the person. Next, we need to think about the important milestones. Milestones is just another word for important events. A lot of times people think about the milestones of a baby or a child as they're growing, like big moments in someone's development or life story. Okay, so the first thing I would say that was important is that Kate grew up loving trees and trees and science. And she studied science, and she even went to college for that, which was pretty cool because most of the time girls weren't becoming scientists, right? Do you remember that? This was a long time ago, and most of the time men were the scientists. So we'll say she grew up loving trees, and she went to college to study science. Awesome. Okay, so that's an important milestone. Let's keep going. Another important milestone for Kate Sessions that we read about was that she moved to San Diego to teach. She moved to San Diego to be a teacher. It's important that you remember that there weren't many trees there. She lived in this dry desert area, and guess what? She didn't love that because she loved trees, and she loved being outside, and she loved studying science. So anyway, she moved to San Diego to be a teacher. There she became a gardener. Okay, let's see here. What else happened that was important? Maybe we should talk a little bit more about how she became a gardener. She contacted people in Mexico and other dry areas to get trees that would grow in dry San Diego. Yeah, that was important because she couldn't just go to the store and just get any old tree because trees like people typically see around here wouldn't thrive in that habitat. Okay, so what else was important here? She opened a nursery. A nursery is like a little mini garden where you can buy trees that are growing so that you can plant them in your own yard. She's taking care of those trees. Nursery. I spelled that wrong. Nursery. She opened a nursery, and this was important because now the citizens of her town could plant trees. She opened a nursery, and citizens planted trees in their own yards. She planted trees all over the city. And especially in Balboa Park, right? Yes, yes, yes. There was going to be a fair at Balboa Park. So she and the community planted many trees there. And eventually, trees were everywhere. Were everywhere in San Diego. And Kate was nicknamed. Do you remember what her nickname was? The mother of Balboa Park. Because she created all of the life that was growing and living there. So that was pretty amazing. Not all of it, but all those trees. Okay, so I hope you kind of saw what we did here, champs. We thought about who the biography was about, and then we thought and picked out the important milestones or important events that happened in the story that kind of led to what our person is known for. She planted trees and made a big impact in her city. Awesome, right? Okay, so what I want you to do next is you can use this form that I shared with you in Seesaw, and I want you to head over to Epic, and you can read about any person that you'd like today. I've shared a collection of biographies with you that have all different types of people. So go ahead and pick somebody out that's interesting to you, and then read about them, and ask yourself, what are the important events or milestones in this text? All right, champs, I hope you find someone awesome to read about. I hope that you're inspired by their life, and I hope that you are a reader who keys into the important details in the text. You got it. All right. Adios, amigos.